If you're enjoying the Health Geeks Book Club podcast, we'd appreciate if you hit the subscribe button, leave a like, rating, or review, whichever your preferred podcatcher platform allows.
This episode is sponsored by Well Balanced Nutrition and 360 Health.
Hey guys, this is producer Tim. Kristen and Eleanor are taking a much-deserved break and catching up on new health books to review and talk with you about. In the meantime, we're going to replay some of Kristen and Eleanor's faves. Let's call this a Redux. This week, we're revisiting episode 53, where Dr. Robert J. Davis joins Kristen and Eleanor to talk about his book, SUPERSIZED Lies, How Myths About Weight Loss Are Keeping Us Fat, and the truth about what really works. Enjoy. Welcome to the Health Geeks Book Club podcast. Listen in as Kristen Norton and Eleanor Russell review all those great health and wellness books you've been wanting to read or you have read and want to talk about. Here's Kristen and Eleanor.
Well, hey, everybody. This is the Health Geeks Book Club podcast, and we're coming out of Clemens, North Carolina. No, we're not. We're in Winston-Salem, North Carolina.
We are in the beautiful town of Winston-Salem, North Carolina.
Yeah, and our, who is the host here?
This is the Less Desirables podcast network.
I thought so. We're on the network now.
Yes.
We have Kristen Norton with us, and she'll tell you a little bit about her in a minute. But we also have a guest today. So, Kristen, kick us off with who you are.
Yeah, I'm Kristen Norton of Well Balanced Nutrition, and super excited to talk about SUPERSIZED Lies by Robert J. Davis. And we are honored to have him here on the podcast with us. Thank you, Robert, so much for talking to us about your book.
Where are you coming in from?
Thank you. Well, thanks for having me. I'm coming from Los Angeles.
I thought you were on the other side of the world.
Yes.
Time zones and all that kind of stuff. We were able to coordinate that. So, yeah, you write books, and you write more than one book. We are looking at the SUPERSIZED Lies book, but I did a little background check here, and I see that you're the CEO and editor-in-chief of Meta Vista Media. So not only are you an author, but you're an executive. So,
so to speak, yeah.
Yeah. So, do you publish a lot of books?
So this is my fourth. I really consider myself a health journalist. That's my background. The company that you mentioned is a health media company. We publish health information, including a lot of videos. So that's sort of my day job, but my side hustle, as it were, is to write books. And as I said, I've written four all about consumer health topics. The last one, for example, was about fitness. This one's about weight loss. So it's something that I'm passionate about, these topics I'm passionate about as a health journalist. And I love the chance to be able to delve into these topics more deeply in the books.
Yeah, and I got the one about coffee's good for you. So I know there's one of those too.
That's about nutrition claims.
Well, you seem passionate about sharing health information, wellness information, and that's commendable because you are very busy. And before we start talking about the specific book, I was curious as to your books are very readable and they're a nice size, but why didn't you do a huge volume with all of them in one volume? What you parceled them out, and I think that's an interesting approach.
That's a good question. Maybe because I didn't think of them all at the same time.
Okay.
Because my first book called The Healthy Skeptic was one that sort of looked generally at health claims, and it sort of arose from my work as a health journalist, getting bombarded with all these press releases and sort of efforts to try to spin me to cover health issues in a way that whatever the entity wanted me to cover those issues. So the Healthy Skeptic sort of looked at the stories behind the stories, whether it's weight loss or supplements or government claims, whatever the case may be, and trying to explain to people how to be more discerning as they interpret the information they get. And then from there, I wrote specifically about nutrition claims. The book you just mentioned, Coffee is Good for You. Then I went from there to fitness. In this book, weight loss. So maybe eventually I'll be able to sort of combine them in some way,
or maybe not.
That's sort of been the approach I've taken so far.
So there's an evolution, is what you're saying.
I guess yes. I guess that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, I don't want to hog the floor. Kristen, you want to say something?
Well, I think it's great that a journalist has the science background that you do. Can you share a little bit about what your background is?
Sure. I do have a background in public health epidemiology and public health and health policy. So that really plays a large part in the work that I do, because I'm able to actually look at the studies and try to figure out what's believable and what's not. Because as we know, there are so many claims, so many conflicting, confusing, contradictory claims that are out there, and often they're not based on science, or maybe just based on a kernel of science and exaggerated. And so what I try to do is actually look at what the science says, look at the studies as a whole, not individual studies, but the science as a whole, and help readers and viewers make more informed decisions. As I see it, my job is not to tell people what to do. It's just to lay out the information as thoroughly and honestly as I can so they can make better decisions about what's right for them.
Yeah, that's so important because in media, and so I'm a registered dietitian in private practice, helping people, have a healthy diet, a healthy relationship with food, and the media will shoot out like, oh, this random study says that XYZ, and then everybody is on board with XYZ that has just one study behind it or a faulty study. And I think you mentioned in here about, the difference between correlation and causation. And I don't think a lot of people understand that when they're looking at what the headlines say about certain studies.
Well, that's an excellent.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, to get into the details, I wanted to talk a little bit about the structure of the book, because I always like to let our readers know what they're getting into. This is, like I said, a very readable book, and you have stories and lists, so you make it very personal and readable that way. And then there is a myth or a truth, or myth and truth section, and then you have a what to do synopsis. So for people who want to jump to the back and look at the short version, they can do that. But if someone wants to understand why you came up with that, there is a wonderful discussion about how you arrived at those things. And so causation and association, correlation.
Yeah, no, well, we forgot to say the full titles of your book, Robert. I'm sorry. So Supersized Lies really focuses on how myths about weight loss are keeping us fat and the truth about what really works. So we're not just talking about nutrition and fitness in this book. It's about weight loss. And, it's the beginning of a new year, and everybody sets these New Year's resolutions. They want to lose weight. They go on these diets. And you point out, Robert, the diet industry is a force to be reckoned with that is now worth more than $60 billion in the United States. And as, Eleanor and I also like to share what the research really says, right? And not just the hype, but it's also hard to get people's attention when they do want just the quick and easy. They want to believe the headlines. And do you find that that's tricky as a journalist to get people's attention, but to also speak to what really does work?
No question. It's a huge challenge. I actually speak to journalists from time to time, particularly younger journalists who are just learning the ropes about health journalism. And we talk about that, about how do you make information interesting? How do you satisfy the need essentially to get eyeballs, which is what in the end is about, to be able to, sell ads. And so, but how do you do that?
But also to get to the understanding. So that, you got to get the attention so they can understand your point.
Exactly right. If people don't read, then there's you failed as a journalist, right? If people aren't going to read the article. So how do you get their attention, but at the same time present some nuance so people can understand? For example, you just mentioned that this study, for example, was a correlational study, an observational study, and wasn't a controlled trial, or it was in rodents and wasn't in people, or it was paid for by the manufacturer of whatever food was studied. And so those kinds of, how do you incorporate those kinds of nuances so people can have a broader understanding of the research or of the subject, but at the same time make it interesting and make it relevant so that they will want to read the story? And there's certain things we talk about, but I think that's really important.
Yeah, and Kristen was talking about, they read the article and then they just want to do it. And early in your book, in the introduction even, you go over biases. And you want to talk about the bandwagon effect?
Sure, yeah. I talk about different biases that affect not only us as consumers, but also health professionals. Even all of us are affected by them. And so I talk about a number of biases that I think explain often why we get misinformation. The bandwagon effect, as you say, is one of them. It's sort of also known as groupthink. Mm-hmm. The idea being that everybody around us believes that, say, the keto diet is the way to go, or intermittent fasting is the way to go. Whatever it is, then we're more likely to say, "Oh, that sounds good to me," and to do it and sort of follow the herd. And that this kind of bias often affects people's thinking about nutrition and weight loss. And so that's, I think, one of several biases that can mislead people into following certain approaches that aren't necessarily scientifically valid.
Yeah, we've read about several books, and a few of them have pointed up clinical bias or clinical blindness, where, it has always been this way and this is the way we treat people, and then somebody comes up with a radical new idea, and it takes a long time for the paradigm to shift because it's so entrenched. These ideas that we get can sometimes just hold us back.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it was A Secret Life of Fat that she talked about, that woman researcher who wasn't taken seriously about how weight can affect hormonal health. And she had to really fight everybody's bias to say, yes, weight does matter in
it turns
reproductive.
Out fat makes estrogen.
Fat makes estrogen, yeah.
Right. And I think when it comes to nutrition and weight loss, I like to say that for many, it's like a religion. And within this religion, there are different denominations. And you get people that have an allegiance bias to whatever that denomination is. So they believe in fasting, or they believe in paleo diet, or they believe in a low fat diet. And again, this is true not only for consumers, it's also true for health professionals who will be zealous proponents of a particular approach. And when there's evidence to the contrary, they tend to dismiss that.
They have so much invested.
Confirmation bias, because they have so much invested. So we see a lot of this in nutrition and weight loss.
Yeah, absolutely. And as a dietitian at Well Balanced Nutrition, we very much believe in the personalized approach that, yes, there is a diet because it worked for somebody, but that diet doesn't necessarily work for everybody. And it's really finding that true path of what's going to work for you and experimenting.
Yeah, and that co-opting of the word diet, I think, is so interesting, because the general perception is this is something I'm going to do short term. I'm going to be stringent deprivation, and I'll be perfect at the end of it, and then I can go back to what I was doing, or not. And you are certainly stressing it's lifestyle that is not diet. Really, I think originally was what is your eating pattern, and what is it you're eating and how much. I mean, that tell me about your diet is not. Tell me what diet you're on.
But it's become a dirty four-letter word.
It has. I mean, you have to be careful how you use that now.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I try to avoid it. I slip and sometimes use it, but I try to avoid that term because, exactly as you say, it implies something that's short term. And we know that if it's short term, it's not going to work, because this is a marathon. It's not a sprint when you're talking about healthy eating and weight management.
Well, I was so appreciative of you making that very clear point in here, that it really doesn't matter which one of these things you go on. You might get a result, and you might get a result on the other one, and you might get a result on the other one. But 2 years from now or 5 years from now, no, minimal. So I thought you really gave a convincing argument for me. I'm accepting it.
Yeah. Well, I want to tie it back to, we talked about groupthink. We talked about finding your personal path and weight loss. Everybody wants to lose weight in the beginning of the year because it's just this magical time somehow. But then people are like, okay, well, let's count calories.
Oh, that was a good, let's talk about that.
So, Robert, tell us about what is the issue with counting calories, and why is it something we need to think twice about doing?
Yeah, it's really an important subject, because there's some people out there that say calories don't matter at all. Don't worry about calories at all. I don't subscribe to that idea. I think it's a biological, physiological fact that calories matter. But I say that calories count, but counting calories doesn't work for many people. And the reason it doesn't work, the most simple explanation, is it's just very hard to do precisely.
Yes.
Think about, yes, there are calorie counts on boxes and on packaged foods, but even those aren't necessarily accurate. They can be off by as much as 20% under law. But that's just the foods we have calorie counts for if you go to a restaurant or if you buy something. But then there's so many other foods, perhaps most of the foods we eat, we don't have calorie counts for. If we go to many restaurants, if we eat at home, if we cook a meal, if we go to someone's house, if we go to a party, we're not going to know the calorie counts. There are apps to try to deconstruct the food and figure out how many calories are in it. Those often obviously are not entirely reliable. And also, it's just very hard to do that. And very frustrating. People find that very frustrating to do. So I think that's one huge problem with counting calories. And also, I just think counting calories can lead to food choices that aren't necessarily the most healthful choices. So, if you see you have a choice between eating nuts or, low-fat potato chips, the low-fat potato chips are going to have fewer calories, but the nuts are going to be a more healthful snack if you eat them in moderation. That are going to fill you up. and are not going to leave you hungry 30 minutes later the way the potato chips might. So I think when we look only at calories, we're not always making the best choices. We need to look at the food as a whole. We need to look at the fiber content and the protein content and the sugar content, added sugar content, the food, the nutritional value of the food overall. And reducing choices just to calories, I think, can lead us to make poor choices when it comes to food sometimes.
Well, you also talk about variability in digestion of those calories, that the food goes in and you may not absorb all of the calories in the food, and also raw versus cooked. So I agree with you.
Yeah, they're all right. There are all kinds of factors.
Yeah, counting calories is tough. I mean, if you're doing that, you show it doesn't really give a great result.
Yeah,
and I think it can just lead to a very, I think, unhealthy relationship with food. I know people who are just obsessed with calories, and they're weighing their foods, and they always, we talk, as you mentioned, I have stories in the book and about a woman who's still trying to get over this lifelong obsession with thinking of a little green number over every food that she encounters, and how detrimental that's been to her emotional health as well as her physical health, to have that obsession with calories, which I think diet culture, we know, pushes.
Yeah, I've had clients who, are on Weight Watchers, and they got by with their points, but with low quality foods like potato chips, but they were within their points or their calories. And then I've had to convince other clients that, when they get that anxiety about reaching their calorie level for the day or their point level for the day, I'm like, just think about it. You're nourishing yourself, and think about the quality of foods you put in there, not that you're like reaching this scary number. So I agree. It's really impactful on mental health when you're always thinking about the number, the calories to enter in, and that those aren't even accurate half the time. And then when you encourage people to cook more at home, then that's even more complicated to put into a calorie tracker. Okay, I've got a half a cup of this, I got to this. You got to figure out what's in that recipe. So
yeah, and that danger, I think, of creating psychological disorders, particularly the eating disorders, is devastating. I had a question for you as a premise for all of this conversation. When we say fit, what is the definition of fit? We talk about we have to be a certain weight, and you do go into the BMI conversation. You want to give us a little bit on that?
Sure. Well, BMI, is this yardstick we hear about all the time, the body mass index that's used by everybody from doctors to dietitians, health fitness professionals, to try to determine who's at the quote right weight. So who needs to gain weight, who needs to lose weight. And the problem, as I talk about in the book, is it's really I think a very poor blunt instrument when it comes to doing what it's supposed to do. It was actually, interestingly, I talk a little about the history. It was a tool that was invented in 1832 to essentially assess populations. It was never in the person that invented it was not even a physician or a health professional. He was a mathematician. So it was that was adapted in the 20th century to become a tool for assessing individuals. So it's really been misapplied in terms of its original purpose. And the problem is just way too simplistic. It's just looks at basically height and weight.
But it's universal. It's everywhere.
Right. And it doesn't take into account your age, your gender, your ethnicity, your race, your bone structure, your muscle, how much muscle mass you have. And so what it does is it leads many people to be labeled as obese.
Labeled.
Yes, who are metabolically healthy. And conversely, people who are metabolically unhealthy are labeled as quote normal. And so but I think the reason it keeps being used is it is so simple, and there's not a great simple alternative. And so I think just it explains why it continues to be used. But I do think it's something that can, as you say, cause real problems in labeling people.
Well, even in management, when you're looking at medications and things, are they necessary or not? And then you do have something in here about how medications can interfere with weight.
Yeah, other medications. Can affect weight gain or weight loss, and common medications I talk about. But that's something that sometimes people aren't aware of, and it's important to talk to a pharmacist about if people suspect that what they're taking may be affecting their weight.
Yeah, and with the BMI, I think it sets up even doctors for expressing realistic expectations to their clients. You know, I need you to get down to this BMI, but you have this whole section in the book about how everyone from doctors to ourselves, we have high expectations of what is possible with weight loss. Talk about that, what you found in the book, what that sets us up for.
Yeah, I think that's a really important issue. And I think we often look at numbers, BMI, or we make up a weight. I want to lose 50 pounds, or I know somebody else who lost 20 pounds, or I want to weigh what I weighed in college, or I want to weigh what I weighed at my lowest weight ever. And I think that we decide what we want to weigh based on criteria. Often they're not realistic. And so I like to say, I think what's important is to figure out at what weight you're going to feel good and be healthy. I think, and that's going to be different for everybody, and that's going to be different for people at different points in their lives. But I think that to me is the best criterion, and also not what some model looks like on Twitter or on social media. I think in that, unfortunately, we know that these images, particularly for women in society and on social media, have unfortunately a really detrimental effect in how people judge what they should look like.
Absolutely.
But the point is that I think I look at all this through the prism of health. That's how people should look at this. At what weight, what is a healthy weight for you? And most importantly, one that's sustainable and realistic for you, one that you can sustain over the long term. And those are the key criteria, I think, that people should consider as they're trying to decide what they, quote, should weigh.
Yeah, but that idea I come back to is a sort of a nebulous thing, is what is healthy? You feel a healthy weight. Is it attitude? Is it function? Is it engagement? Is it lack of prescriptions? What is health?
I would define it as, that's a very good question. Yeah. I would define it as several things. I would define it as when do you feel good emotionally and physically? You're able to do the things you want to do in your life. And then also, if you want to look at markers, metabolic markers, your blood pressure, your cholesterol, your blood sugar level, things like that. And I think those are some numbers you can look at that are also indicators of your health overall. But I think health is not only your physical health, it's also your emotional health too. And I think all those things are relevant here.
Right.
Yeah, and that leads us into the conversation about body positivity. And you said the healthcare markers like your cholesterol and your blood pressure, and then there's a study in here that is often referenced that you can lose 5 to 10% of your body weight and improve those markers. And I heard a really interesting argument about that in the body positivity world, that that's a correlation and causation thing. That is it the behaviors that they are doing that cause the healthy effect of their cholesterol and their blood sugars and, the exercise, the things they're doing, or is it the weight loss? Why are we saying the weight loss improves these, not the behaviors that they're doing?
Interesting.
Did that come up for you as you're researching?
I think that's an excellent point. And again, I think that's consistent with what I believe, which is that the focus should always be your health, as I said. So focus. So if you're thinking about this, think about how to increase your physical activity, how to make your eating more healthful, and that's what matters. And I think if people say, well, then try to lose, or if a doctor says lose 5 to 10% of your body weight, again, there are healthy ways to do that, and there are unhealthy ways. And if people go about just trying to drop their weight to get 5% or 10% of their body weight off, and they do it in a way that's not helpful, then I think that's really counterproductive. So I think the focus, instead of just losing the weight, should be on taking steps to make yourself more healthy. That's what matters.
Yeah, I agree. I just want to quote this in the book real quick, that this is called your best weight. At Well Balanced Nutrition, we call it our happy weight, but it's the weight that people are able to achieve while living the healthiest lifestyle they can truly enjoy. I think that's a great way to put it.
I like that.
Yeah, actually, I quoted another expert in that, but that's something that I wholeheartedly endorse. Yeah.
Since I like the sciencey stuff, I'm going to call our attention to, you talk about in a couple of places, we're battling biology. And I thought, oh man, there's the warrior thing. Okay, so it looks like we've got hormones, genes, and microbes. And you want to explore why you use the terminology battling biology, and what can we do with that little bit?
Yeah, well,
I love biology. Biology's good.
Yeah. Well, our bodies are designed by evolution in a way to protect us in case of starvation, famine, that kind of thing. So it's a wonderful evolutionary gift to help keep us alive in those situations. But fortunately, most of us today don't face those kinds of things. But unfortunately, those kinds of evolutionary gifts we have can be a problem when we're trying to lose weight. So what that means, and what it manifests itself, for example, is that as we lose weight, our metabolism, for example, slows down because our body's trying to keep us from wasting away, to keep us alive. So it wants to keep us, within a certain zone. And so what that means is that as we lose weight, cut calories, we have to, if we're trying to cut calories, for example, we have to eat less and less and less to be able to stay at that weight because our metabolism's slower. And the metabolism, say somebody goes from 200 pounds to 150 pounds, the metabolism of that person at 150 when they've lost weight is going to be slower, even slower than somebody who started at 150. But again, that's one of the many ways that we have compensation mechanisms in our bodies. And so that's something we have to be aware of. Our earlier conversation about calories, when just cutting calories, what the problem with that, or counting calories, is that it doesn't take into account how our bodies respond to those calorie deficits. So the point is that there are, and then, for example, you mentioned our microbiome, the microbes in our guts. Everybody's different that way, and there's some evidence that perhaps the combination of foods we eat can affect how many of the calories that we eat that we actually absorb. And remember, it's not the calories we consume that matters, it's the calories that our guts actually absorb. And so that's another feature. Some people are going to absorb more calories and be more likely to put on weight. Some people we know are genetically more prone than others to put on weight. We all know those people. We can't stand them, that eat whatever they can. They never gain an ounce. And there are other people that eat very little and gain a lot of weight. And that's certainly governed to a large extent by genetics. So the point is that there are all these things that are biological mechanisms that we have to think about and contend with. And that it's a reminder that even though we're often told by diet culture that our weight is entirely within our control, and if only we try hard enough, we'll lose weight and look like this person in the photo.
And you can do it in 3 months.
Yes, you can do it in 3 months. And that's entirely false because there's so many other factors, particularly our biology, that's involved here.
Yeah, and it's not as simple as move more and eat less.
Right. We've read a couple of books on the microbiome and talked about, feeding the microbiome and what are the different bacterial colonies in there and what are more healthy or less healthy. And that's pretty interesting. We're learning so much more about that. I'm kind of intrigued with that conversation. It's good.
Yeah, we're going to keep learning lots of stuff about that.
I want to talk about exercise. Do you have something else here?
After you, go ahead.
Okay, so the exercise thing, everybody's out there saying, HIIT, we got to do this high intensity workout, it's going to be great for us. Or they're saying, no, just walk around the block 5 times and get your aerobic work. No, lift weights, and you do a lot of them. And so people don't like any of that. That's the hardest challenge, I think, when I talk with people, is moving their body. It's like, just move your body. That's going to be really good for you. So how about, I'm willing to accept your idea that the crash diets or the calorie counting and those sorts of things really don't, keto may work for you, high carb may work for you. This other thing may, there's variability. It doesn't matter which one you try, you could probably lose weight, but the idea of maintaining the weight loss is really not going to be much different between any of these programs. So moving off what we put in our mouth and then over to how we move our bodies, do you have any recommendations there?
Yes, I have a lot of thoughts about that. I should start by saying I'm an avid exerciser myself.
Because you like it.
I do. And the last book I wrote was all about exercise. And I honestly believe that it's the closest thing we have to a fountain of youth. It can do so many things for so many people, everything from reducing your risk of heart disease and cancer to improving your mood to improving your sex life, and just everything in between. The one thing, sorry.
Have you read Spark?
Yes.
Good. We did too.
But the one thing that, interestingly, it doesn't do very well is the thing that many people look to it to do, which is to help you shed pounds.
Yeah.
Right.
And so what I find is that many people start an exercise program, go to the gym saying, okay, I'm going to lose 10 pounds, 20 pounds, 50 pounds, whatever it is, and I'm going to exercise. And they find that they're not losing the weight. The exercise is not helping them. So what happens? They give up on exercise. Right. And I think that's a terrible outcome because they're approaching exercise the wrong way. And exercise is being set up to fail. because of false expectations. The one thing, that said, the thing that exercise can do is to help people keep weight off, to prevent weight gain. There is good evidence that exercise can help people from gaining weight in the first place and help them keep weight off that they have lost. But it's key that it's not necessarily a great way to lose weight. Most importantly, just because it doesn't burn that many calories. The kind of exercise that most of us do, to go for a brisk walk, take a yoga class, ride a bike, all great things to do for your health and for your overall well-being, not necessarily that effective when it comes to losing weight. And so I think that it's very important to frame exercise not as something to help us lose weight, but as something that's going to improve our overall well-being. And as you say, it's all about thinking, is it really not exercise, but just about moving your body in whatever way feels good to you, whether it's going for a walk, whether it's playing with your kids or grandkids, whether it's whatever, you're going dancing, going for a hike, whatever it is that is going to make you feel good, and focusing on not only the long-term benefits. That's harder to focus on, not having a heart attack in 20 years, but more importantly, the short-term benefits. How do you feel less stress? Are you able to sleep better? Are you able to deal better with your difficult boss or your screaming children?
Are you happy?
Yes. And do you feel more empowered? Mm-hmm. And so all those kinds of things, I think, are the right ways to think about physical activity and how it benefits us, and not to think of it as a tool for helping us lose weight.
Oh, I agree wholeheartedly.
Yeah, and Kristen and I are women. Did you notice that? And so you're a guy, and it seems like men respond to exercise a little better than women sometimes, because we have a compensatory thing that happens to us after we exercise, where we eat more. We get hungrier.
Yeah.
So I think getting it as a part of the lifestyle is critical. When we talk about health, it is a lifestyle. It's not a fix. It's not a diet. It's not a short-term thing. It's the way you're going to live. And so moving your body's part of it.
Another thing. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, one other thing I think it's important is not to think of it as punishment for overindulgence.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes.
People say, I was bad, quote unquote bad, over the, I went on vacation or over the holidays, or I haven't stuck to my diet, so I'm going to go work out more and go to the gym more. And I think, that's completely the wrong way to think about exercise, because it becomes punishment. It becomes something we have to do to make up for, quote, being bad. And again, it's easy to understand why people aren't going to sustain that if they see it in that negative way.
And that language is so hard to change. There was a Thanksgiving Day run thing that had little signs along the way that told you how many calories were in your food that you were going to eat later today. Why does that matter? Why can't you just be out getting your exercise, not I'm going to burn these calories so I can eat all this food later?
Mm-hmm. Connecting the two.
Yeah, and then trying to find exercise programs that don't say, come on, let's burn those calories. You're here for results. No, I'm here for all the other reasons to exercise. Yeah. So I wish our message would just get out there a little faster.
That's why we're doing this. That's why we're doing this.
Language. Yeah. You also talk about the importance of sleep in weight loss. Tell me more about that, and how often do people think sleep really plays a role?
Yeah, sometimes people don't make that connection. We hear more and more about it, and there's more evidence coming out. But I think there's a pretty good body of evidence linking the two, that when people get insufficient sleep, which is a lot of us, unfortunately, in today's world, that can have a negative effect when it comes to weight. There's studies that actually put people in a lab, I talk about, and they let some people sleep up to 10 hours, and they let other people, they allowed them to sleep only 5 hours. And even over the course of a few weeks, they found that the people who slept less put on weight, put on pounds, and the people who slept more didn't. And there are a number of explanations why that may be. There may be that lack of sleep can trigger certain areas of our brains to make us hungrier. It could affect certain hormones, or it could just be that when people are up more hours, they have more opportunities to eat. So, or some combination of those things. But there is a good, as I say, good evidence that trying to get at least 7 hours of sleep on a regular basis is conducive to better weight management.
Yeah, I talk about it a lot because people come to me with a weight loss plateau, and they seem to be doing all the right things, but they're really stressed out. They're not getting a good night's sleep. And we talk a little bit about how that can affect not only their food choices, but their metabolism sometimes.
I was just going to say, this book is full of good information when we get down to the last chapter, which is what works.
The good stuff.
Yeah, what works. And what are the secrets, which you said, if you hear that word, just don't pay attention to it. There are no secrets.
Right.
It's pretty obvious what you need to do.
No secrets and no shortcuts, right.
Yeah, and it's like we know what to do. So that idea of building communities that help support that. And when we talk about system change, which you very clearly at the beginning of your book said, I'm not talking about systems, I'm talking about individual responsibility, which I think is wonderful. And we read a book by Mark Hyman called Food Fix, and he does take on the system quite provocatively in that book. What are manufacturers putting on the shelves for people to buy? What, these fat-free foods, what did they really do to us? What did the gluten-free foods, what do you have to look at there if you're watching those sorts of things? So just build, and like Kristen's talking about when we have community runs and they put language up around it that just counter affects the benefits that might happen. There's a lot to do systematically, but individually, you've got a great chapter here. And you talk about the whole way of going through that. I don't know if we want to give away the secrets of your book, or
can you give us just a few for our listeners?
Sure. Well, I think the important way to think about how we eat is what's most conducive to good health, and that's a whole foods diet. Doesn't mean going to the store Whole Foods necessarily. It means a diet that is rich in whole grains, fruits, vegetables, lean meats, nuts, seeds, dairy if you consume dairy, and then minimizing highly processed foods, things like soda, candy, sweets, chips, fried foods. Now, it doesn't mean you never eat those, and that's an important point, because we know we've just been talking about restricted diets that say you must eat all these food, this list of 7 foods, and never eat this list of 9 foods. That's a non-starter. So that when we say limit those, it doesn't mean never eat them. We all need to have treats that we enjoy. But the point is that over time, we learn to make those special treats and things that we enjoy occasionally rather than everyday staples. And that's not an overnight process. It's something that requires changing your eating habits over time and finding foods in the other categories, which are all kinds of foods. The list I just gave before of foods that we want to try to eat more of, foods we enjoy, that they're going to fill us up and sustain us. And finding the foods that you like. It doesn't mean you have to eat. I don't, for example, like cauliflower. You don't have to eat cauliflower if you don't like that.
I'm sorry.
You don't have to eat kale.
It's so good.
But to find foods within fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, seeds, lean meats that you like, and that is the key here. And what the beauty of it is you can customize eating, again, to what you said before about what you enjoy, what's going to work for you, and that's going to be different for every person. But to find a combination of foods that works for you, and that's the key. Absolutely.
Yep.
I'm with
you 100%. Yep. You want to work for well-balanced nutrition, because that's our message. And you just said it really well.
Well, one of the things that brings up to me is we're talking about adults, and so our children are the ones that are being, their habits are starting early. And the more that we can do as adults to model a more healthy lifestyle is going to pay off big time for that generation coming up next.
Oh, yeah.
Because the choices, that we present them with, because they don't go to the store, they don't buy the food, they don't, say we're going out to dinner tonight. That's a kind of a responsibility I think we need to step up to. And a lot of us have sort of shirked that because of the lifestyles that we're leading where we don't have time anymore. And so the quick fix is the quick fix, and the convenience options. Instead of grabbing an apple, which is very convenient, we have allowed ourselves to grab the burger or whatever.
Right.
So,
and I will add from personal experience, I'm one of those kids who grew up with the bad foods.
You mentioned that, the
sugary foods and sodas and hamburgers and fries and sugary cereals and all that, and it's taken me many years, and I still struggle to sort of move away from those habits, because as you say, when we learn those things as children, they become deeply ingrained. And I know a number of people who struggle even more than I do at trying to change their eating habits because of the way they grew up eating. And so that by trying to start our children on the right foot really can make a big difference for them later on, and not to have the struggle to move away from those deeply ingrained eating habits.
Yeah, and I think sometimes we think children last forever, and they don't. They were only with you for like 10, 15 years maybe. And so if you have to correct yourself for that amount of time, it's well worth it, right? And it might pay off if you do it for 15 years. You might live that way the rest of your life too.
Yeah.
So there it is. Everybody should have a family. Yeah. There you go. Have kids, and then your eating and your lifestyle will be good. Yeah, we think.
I think it does give you good motivation to, have these healthy behaviors. And I'm seeing more and more parents understand the mental health part of it and understanding that it's not just about good foods, bad foods. We really have to come from it from a healthy mental and physical vantage point, like what you were talking about and mentioned throughout your book, Robert.
Right. I agree.
And I just want to say that with my clients, I like to figure out their learning style. And a lot of them tell me they're research learners. And you do a really fabulous job of explaining the research, making it easy to read and understand, even the little nuances of it. And so I feel 100% confident sending them to your book and diving into this research, and I appreciate you writing it.
And your bibliography is substantial. It's a very, very thick bibliography. So this is not just a lightweight idea this guy came up with. Robert, we're really happy that you have written this and shared it with us. Driving into the studio today, I got a random call from a friend from years ago who has an adult daughter, and the family has always been struggling with weight, but she was saying she's making some progress. Her blood markers are off. And I said, you're going to have to listen to this podcast we're doing, because this book we're reviewing is something that you would find very helpful in your journey. So we're going to share this. I definitely am recommending your book. It's readable. Like I said, some of the books we've read are 500 pages, and a lot of our audience says, there's no way I can do that. This book is manageable. It is, and that's why I asked you earlier why you didn't write a big epistle. I like the fact that you've broken your topics out into these more handy books, and I'm hoping that your readership will grow because you're sharing some wisdom.
And you do a lot of quick little videos too online.
Oh, you have Healthy
Skeptic? Can they find you?
Yeah, tell us about the Healthy Skeptic.
Yeah, so Healthy Skeptic is my brand, and people can find me at healthyskeptic.com. And as you mentioned, I have a number of short videos on a lot of the topics we've talked about, other topics, just, a minute and a half or 2 minutes, where I'll take a claim, whatever it is, and break down the science and try to help people understand what's true and what's not.
Or the other thing about science that I do want to say here is there are levels of evidence, and sometimes you can't have the randomized trial, level of evidence. So it's helpful to have someone, if you're not familiar with that, to explain this is the best information we have right now with the data that we've got, and it could change. And because right now people are I think becoming very skeptical of science because it does change, and they don't understand that that's what science does. It refines itself. It's a process. It's not a static. And so anyway, thank you.
Well, thank you. And I hope that when people read the book, they can find it helpful. I've tried to, as you say, lay out the information in a way that's understandable. And for people that, like me, like to geek out on the science, they can go look at the studies, look up the studies. And I went through more than 1,000 studies.
Did he say geek? He said geek. He said geek.
Yes, yep. Exactly.
He's one of us.
And so I know some people like us do, and some people don't, and that's fine. So I've tried to gear it toward people that don't want to delve into all the details, where it's be understandable, but for those that want to go look up the studies and find out more, to have those references there and find out how I came about arriving at these conclusions that I did.
Oh, and I forgot to even ask you about this. I was going to do it at the very beginning. The Supersized Lies. Back in 2004, there was a movie called Supersize Me.
Yes.
Yeah, that I remember watching that, going, it's a story about a man who said, okay, I'm going to go to, I think he said McDonald's.
Yes.
Okay. Right. And I'm going to order, and if they ask me if they want to supersize me, I'm going to say yes, and I'm going to eat it all. And he was monitored by the medical professionals, and it wasn't very far into that little thing, a couple of months. His liver enzymes were going nuts. All sorts of things happened, and they were telling him, "You can't keep this up." He said, "Yeah, I got to, because I'm, committed to it." He about killed himself.
Morgan Spurlock was the guy who did it.
Who's a very interesting fellow too.
Yeah.
So anyway, when I saw your title come across, I went, "Oh, I wonder if he's going to talk about eating a whole lot of fast food." And I was happily to discover that it was
a little
not
different than that.
Right.
Yeah.
Not part of this book.
No. All right. Well, I'm Eleanor at 360 Health. You can reach me at 360healthforyou.com, and we'd love to have you comment on this podcast and share it with your friends, because this is a good one to share.
And I'm Kristen Norton with Well Balanced Nutrition. And Robert, thank you so much for what you do. I think it's really important to take the science and simplify it. And thank you so much for being here and geeking out with us today.
Yes.
It was really fun. Thank you both so much.
Look forward to future conversations as your next books come out.
That would be great. Thank you.
Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks very much.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.
The views and opinions stated in this podcast are solely those of the contributors and are not necessarily those of our distributors or hosting company. This podcast is copyrighted, and no part can be reproduced without the expressed written consent of Kristen and Eleanor.